Welcome, everyone. Good morning. It's so great to see all of you here. Welcome to San Diego. Who's here for the first time at GraphQL Summit? All right. Wow. Welcome. I want to thank you for making the time to join us. I say this every year. We run Summit as a learning event, and we've really built the whole conference around getting you the real story from the teams that have done the most with Graph. Yesterday, we had some amazing workshops. We had sessions on router, on subscriptions, on server-driven UI, observability, a whole bunch more. And a lot of you told me last night how helpful they were. How about a round of applause for the folks that led the workshops yesterday? Today and tomorrow, we have the most technical program we've ever run at Summit, thanks to your feedback, including a new track this year devoted to security on the graph. I'm really excited about that. Let's give a hand for folks that are bringing security to the conversation, too. And I want to echo what Yves said and thank our sponsors. We wanted to bring the groundbreaking companies that had most contributed to GraphQL over the years and have you hear from them too. So thank you for the work you do and for joining us here. So I really encourage you to talk with other folks here and learn from their experience, and also to share what you know. Candidly, one reason we throw this event is to learn from you. And everything we've built at Apollo, from Apollo Client to Federation, to some things I'm excited to share with you today, all of it came from conversations at Summit. Your input and your feedback are a gift to us. We're in debt to you for that, and grateful to you for joining us this year again to share more of it. It really has been an extraordinary year for us. Last year, up here, I said we're all in on the supergraph, and we were not alone in that view. One lens we have for seeing the scale of that momentum is the growth of our customer base here at Apollo. And across such a wide variety of industries and verticals, it's just been extraordinary. Household names in banking and fintech, in media, in healthcare, in retail, in sports and entertainment, in travel, in automotive, are all making strategic investments in supergraph. And they're here. You're going to hear their stories, and you're going to get a chance to learn what brought them here and what they're going to next. What's common to all of this is the mess of everything that's involved. Users expect these kinds of great experiences. Companies need to build them, and they expect those experiences everywhere. You've got not just web and mobile, but a growing number of platforms: voice, kiosk, IoT, wearables, AI. And the services and systems that power those experiences, those aren't just new technologies and a growing number of microservices, but everything from mainframes to hyperclouds, databases, hundreds of software systems that all have to be brought together. And when you ask the folks who are dealing with these issues, you tend to hear a consistent trio of what they want. They want a single source of truth that gives a clear understanding of the services and data they have and how they're using them. They want much faster velocity, being able to ship more and more quickly and more efficiently. And they want a delightful, data-rich user experience that's consistent across every touch point. These desires are driving the adoption of new platforms across the whole stack. Consider the app side of the house, where you have React, design systems, headless technologies, front-end clouds now. And the back end, where we have containerization in Kubernetes, service mesh, data and infrastructure as code, a rich wealth of new technologies and new platforms. And platforms are what let us replace so much of the work we used to do with reusable, configurable, and composable building blocks. So they've driven this acceleration on apps and on services of what we have to work with. And yet here we've been in the middle, handwriting all of these single-use connections between our services and our users. It's the absolute worst, the opposite of all those platform characteristics I mentioned. And it's a night and day difference. In the handwritten layers, the more you build, the more work it takes to get the same result. You pay this entanglement tax on everything that came before, and the ROI is just brutal. But platforms are different. The platform layers increase our productivity because each investment is a reusable building block that saves time and adds value. It's the compound interest of building software. And that hunger for a platform approach and those benefits, that, I think, is what's really behind the growth of supergraph. It's not just GraphQL's technical benefits of strong typing and developer ergonomics. Lots of APIs offer that. But GraphQL turns out to be the language that makes possible a self-service platform, a new layer of the stack that sits between your APIs and your apps, that makes them both better and that scales. And that's the big idea of supergraph. It's really a platform. And platform engineering is a lens we can use to help us tackle the most important questions and really the focus of the conference. How do we get more out of graph, and how do we get it faster? Because platforms aren't a build it and they'll come. They're not overnight rollouts. They're an investment. And like any investment, getting it right takes a mindset, it takes a clear plan, and it takes the proper tools. So it starts with the mindset. The great platforms share certain characteristics, and the teams that lead them share certain characteristics. And the API tier should be no different. Platforms fundamentally are about enabling others. Platform engineering is a service mindset. You're building for your users. You're offering a product that has to win their hearts and minds. It can't just be about what you prefer or what you need. That might be a conversation for you and me. But your users have their own priorities and requirements, and you need to meet them on their terms. So good platforms are self-service. There's no gatekeeper. There's a clear path for your users and a quick time to value for them. And they're simple to approach and understand. Features are clearly scoped, they complement each other, and together they form an opinionated and thoughtful experience for your users. We've written about this idea of applying those platform engineering principles to the particulars of the API layer. And whether you're deep into supergraph or just starting to consider it, I think you'll find some helpful perspective here and encourage you to check it out. So that's the mindset. Let's talk about the plan. Graph is a particular kind of platform. And if you've struggled rolling it out, or if you've had some initial success but feel like you've hit a blocker or a bit of a wall, what you're running into may be the particular challenges of building a marketplace. Marketplaces are a special kind of platform that bring different kinds of users together with complementary needs. Think about eBay with buyers and sellers, or DoorDash, or Airbnb, or Uber. Marketplaces are incredibly valuable, but they're also tricky to get right. And the good news is we know a lot, particularly from the consumer web, about what works. And I want to share a few of those properties of marketplaces that I think will be helpful for you to know. The first is that the two sides of a marketplace, the supply and the demand, have different users with different needs. And to nail this marketplace dynamic, to nail the self-service dynamic, you really need to serve both of them. In a supergraph, the demand side is the app devs. They write queries. The supply side are the API owners. They write schema. And the ask you make of each of them and the value they get by using graph, it has to make sense to them and fit their needs. It doesn't work to just focus on one or the other. But even that's not enough. Marketplaces need to be bootstrapped to get up and running. And in almost every case, that involves some kind of a trick on the supply side of the marketplace. Think about it. For an app dev, GraphQL is a joy, and it's pretty easy to explain. But the onboarding journey for API owners is a lot more complex. They've got schema and resolvers to write. And the benefits to the API owners don't materialize right away. There needs to be enough traffic on the graph for that to really come into play. So as important as a self-service mindset is, it's a bit of a trap in the early going. And most platform teams should expect to get pretty hands-on with the initial supply side during the bootstrap phase to make the graph a success. Another characteristic is that marketplaces have a minimum viable size. Beyond that size, they grow organically. But until then, you're bootstrapping. And this can also be a bit of a trap. Managing the scope and the complexity and the risk of any new project, we all know the importance of doing that. And it's true for Supergraph just like anything else. But if you pick a use case that's too narrow or too niche or too safe, or if you tailor the graph too much for the super specific needs of that first use case, you can get to something valuable, but not necessarily viable. I recommend thinking at the start about what that minimum viability milestone is for your graph and how to make sure that you get all the way there. And one more takeaway, and this one's a little spicy for the platform engineers here, but growth wins. Marketplaces optimized for fast organic growth do very, very well. And the thing of it is, for those of us that have a systems or an infrastructure background, this is a little uncomfortable. We love the idea of a big platform, but we also value correctness and precision and consistency and quality. But it's also the size of the marketplace that ultimately determines its value. So my advice is establish growth as another value right from the start. And consider relaxing a bit some of your thoughts on ensuring a super clean and curated schema, for example, in favor of making some space for teams to move quickly and experiment and contribute as fast as they can. Of course, a lot more goes into a good plan than broad ideas about marketplaces. And we've got you covered there too. One thing I'm really excited to announce today is the Supergraph Architecture Framework. This is something written by our solutions team at Apollo and inspired by AWS's well-architected framework. And ours captures dozens of specific and actionable best practices. They're all hard-won lessons from working with our customers, organized as an audit that you can use to measure where you stand and what your next priorities can be. The operational excellence pillar, for example, covers ideas like setting KPIs for your graph, team structure, processes for building demand-oriented schemas. And the other pillars, security, reliability, performance, and efficiency, are also valuable. I really encourage you to take a look at this. You can grab any Apollo solutions person here, or grab it online and see for yourself where you are. So along with a mindset and a plan go the tools. And from day one, we've set out to be an extension of your engineering team, building reusable tools that you can use instead of having to do the work yourselves. There's 3 areas we're most focused on, and they all go to the platform approach that I talked about. There's a lot here, so let me just jump right in. It starts with open foundations. This is what's made all of what we've talked about possible. And we didn't get there overnight. We first introduced schema stitching back in 2017, this first idea of composing graphs together. But this early approach required writing a lot of intricate code, and what we found is it didn't scale to the size that people really needed their graphs, and didn't offer the tools that let them build those graphs and manage them effectively. So in 2019, just 4 years ago, we released Federation, a declarative approach to composing graphs. and introduced the idea of entities that are so core and central to that approach. In 2021, we shipped Federation 2 that brought a more flexible and fluid ownership model that makes truly large-scale supergraphs possible. And a year later, we shipped Apollo Router, a carrier-grade implementation of Federation designed from the ground up for performance, stability, and security. Every one of these steps we proved out hand in hand with customers. And over the last year, Router's now been battle tested and proved out in some of the most mission-critical settings. Wayfair, for example, an early adopter of Federation, migrated to Apollo Router last year in time for Black Friday and the holiday shopping season. And Black Friday is no joke for a retailer. Everything's on the line. But they wanted to get on Router for the performance and cost-saving benefits. And the results were fantastic. They ran 100% of their traffic on Router for the shopping season. They cut latency by 2/3. They cut their cost of compute by 90-some-odd%. And they got another benefit too, which is they were able to retire the majority of the custom code they'd written in JavaScript on their previous Federation stack in favor of built-in Router functionality. Wayfair's not the only one. Intuit's here today to share their story of running Router during their busiest time of year. And that session is one that I'm super excited to hear about. Another example of true enterprise scale adoption where it really matters for the business. We've, over the last year, focused on shipping functionality built in to Router that's focused on the needs of the most complex environments and the needs of integrating Graph into the most sophisticated stacks. Just a couple weeks ago, for example, we shipped Query Plan Cache Warmup. And this is vital for teams that have a super agile approach to their graph and are shipping updates to large supergraphs quickly. In Federation, each time you have a new supergraph, you replan the queries. And pre-warming the cache is necessary to ensure that there are no latency spikes when you roll out a new supergraph under heavy load. So this is an example of the kind of nuts and bolts work that goes into an enterprise-grade solution for Federation at scale. And that's really our vision with Apollo Router. What makes the great platforms successful is the ones that are built for the most demanding environments. We learned this from Kubernetes. We learned this from React. The ones that work at that scale, those are the ones that work everywhere and gain the adoption. And so our vision is an open implementation of a standards-based Federation, a tight and stable core with the extension points and the flexibility and freedom to extend in any direction necessary to build what you're building. And when you talk about innovation and you talk about building for scale, nobody is bigger than Netflix. The #1 streaming service in the world, a leader in platform engineering, not just with Graph, but on so many other fronts, going all the way back to their early commitment to AWS. I remember reading every one of those posts about EC2 and Chaos Monkey and all of the book that they've written on how to do cloud and distributed systems right. They've spun off countless influential projects over the years, and they've been an inspiration to so many of us. So it's been a real privilege to have a chance to work side by side with their team on Apollo. And I'd like to bring up Antoine Boyer to tell their story.
Thank you. Thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm Antoine. I'm an engineer on the API team. And this morning, I'm going to take you on a little journey, our API journey. So in the early 21st century, Netflix decided to move to the cloud and also embrace a microservices architecture. This cloud thing was leading edge at the time, so we had to do some inventing. In 2012, we were running into the problem of having lots of clients and an insufficiently flexible REST API. So we create this thing called FileCore, which exposed our entire API as a JSON graph. So now here we go. We have this super flexible graph API, but as Netflix grows, we run into the next bottleneck. The API team still needs to be included in most feature development. We realized we need a way to distribute API calls without needing an API engineer intervention. And so in 2018, we started experimenting with this thing called federation, but using FileCore. And really, there was this other thing that was getting like rapid adoption called GraphQL on the studio side of the company, and frankly, in industry in general. And so we took notice. You see, FileCore and GraphQL solve similar problems, but one was getting steam faster than the other. And Netflix is an entertainment company. It is not an API company, nor a GraphQL company. You see, we have limited number of innovation chips at our disposal, and maintaining an OSS project does bear cost. So learning from this, we felt the need for Netflix to be part of the larger community. And so in 2019, with the Apollo Federation specification release, we took our first bet as this essentially GraphQL federation. We ported the Apollo JavaScript gateway to the JVM because as early adopters, we wanted to move fast, but also leverage Netflix's great JVM tooling ecosystem. And so 6 months later, with federation, now we had backend teams and front-end teams moving autonomously with less operational burden. While us, on the API team, we were actually free to improve the actual API infrastructure. The federation adoption caught like wildfire in the company. And we had, all of a sudden, hundreds of engineers working on the graph. So we faced a new set of challenges. And so we had to do more inventing. And so we created this override directive, or the common type on each subgraph, because the problems that we were facing were specifically around sharing types or moving fields across subgraph. And so, and also other domains, we pushed the envelope with federated subscriptions. And so this usage continued to grow, and so did our collaboration with Apollo. And so we formed a working group. We shared learnings, internal improvements, and worked together with what would become the next version of federation. And so here we are today, a year later after federation is GA, and we placed this other bet to move our internal gateway to join the larger community using the Apollo router. And we're excited, really excited to share what we learn and then to keep building with the community. Thank you.
How about one more round of applause for Netflix? It has been an absolute joy to work with that team, and everyone is going to gain, I think, some amazing benefits as we continue to explore what the next frontier is for this infrastructure and bring that back to the community. I'm so excited for that. Thank you for sharing the story. All right. Next thing, we are very focused on bringing more APIs to the graph. That goes to the marketplace dynamic I talked about. And we've been making a lot of investments here to save time and add value for the teams that are bringing things to the graph. So let me show you a few of the things that we're working on. The way you connect services to Apollo is with subgraphs, and there's a vibrant ecosystem of community-led frameworks in dozens of languages that let you write those. Last year here at Summit, we announced the Supergraph Development Kit, which includes standard templates for many of these frameworks, giving you a quick way to get started and a standard path to follow. Most of these are community maintained, but two have long been particularly important. JavaScript, thanks to its roots in app dev, and Java, with its substantial footprint in the enterprise. And for those two, we maintain here at Apollo the core federation libraries and documentation and examples. As supergraph is spread, there's a third language that we're seeing more and more of in the field, and that's .NET. So today, I'm super excited to share that we're elevating .NET as our third first-tier subgraph language, right alongside Java and JavaScript. As a kid growing up in the 90s, I never thought I'd say that, but C#. This means Apollo maintained federation support with documentation and enablement and training to help make your teams successful. You can expect more .NET examples from us going forward. And of course, you can plan for .NET support across all the new Apollo features we build as they land. We're really excited about this. On the tools front, we've made investments as well. GraphOS linting is something that we shipped earlier this summer. It's an opinionated approach that's tailored for federation, and what we found works best at scale. So along with the typical rules to enforce style and convention, we've written more than 25 rules specific to federation and composition. I talked a moment ago about Fed2 introducing a more flexible model. That's work we did in partnership with Netflix. But what comes with that is the need for tooling that lets you tighten that model back down to meet the specific needs of your organization. And that's what linting's really all about. And we take a practical, leave it better than you found it approach that doesn't force you to make wholesale changes right away. It lets you approach this incrementally, adding rules and modifying your graph as you go to converge on something that is consistent and meets the needs across the organization while still having the velocity and the self-service that lets you go fast. But there's more. Another tool we're working on is schema change proposals. This one is currently in private preview, but I want to give you a sneak peek. And the idea here is a workflow for collaborating on demand-oriented schemas. It's something we've heard from many customers as an important requirement to help them go more quickly and onboard more teams with subgraphs. So it starts with the design phase. You can collaborate and comment and iterate. There's a review process and everything you'd expect in a complete development workflow. And then, once you've settled on your schema, it ties into the code development process. So as you implement your subgraph and the resolvers, we can validate that those are compatible with what was discussed and what's been approved before they're published into the supergraph. Northwestern Mutual is one of our partners using proposals today. They have a stewards model. What that means is there's a group that includes members from each subgraph and client team that want to have eyes together on how the overall schema is evolving. Not as a blocker, but as a way to understand the overall shape and direction and bring overall consistency to the graph without creating a development bottleneck on the platform team. We're excited to show this to you. Come find us at the booth and we'll get you on board. Here's one more. We are very excited about the potential of the graph to make your APIs more valuable. And there's no better example of that than subscriptions. For us, subscriptions aren't just a GraphQL feature. We look at them through the platform lens. And what Apollo subscriptions really do is they turn your existing APIs into async APIs. And that unlocks new use cases and new value from systems that you built for something a long time ago. And to do this, we had to revisit everything about subscriptions, all the way down to the spec and the protocol level. In Apollo, we terminate subscriptions in the router and coalesce them down to a minimum number of requests to your underlying subgraph. And that's vital because those core APIs weren't built for the scale to track millions of clients. We separated the subscription from the invalidation and introduced a scalable approach based on callbacks so that you can trigger events not just from the subgraph, but from systems of record like microservices and message buses that cause those updates to flow to the clients. On the client side, we replaced WebSockets with a new protocol based on HTTP multipart, leveraging what we built for Defer last year and ensuring compatibility with modern cloud products and environments. And most importantly, we integrated subscriptions deep into the query planner. So in Apollo, you can request data in your subscription not just from the narrow API, but from the entire supergraph, just like you can for any query. We have been super excited to get subscriptions out into the field. It is out. You can use it. Come to our talk tomorrow. Corinne is going to give a great walkthrough of all the details. And we're really excited for how subscriptions make the graph more valuable to your API teams and how it helps them bring more to the graph. So I've covered investments in foundations, and I've covered how we help bring APIs to the graph. Let me talk about one more area, and that's ops. Ops is so important if you're building a supergraph at scale, if you're putting your business on it. And I want to start with security. One thing customers have been telling us is they want to use their graph as a security layer. And so we've done that with a code as policy declarative approach that lets you adopt a defense in depth approach across your whole stack. I'm really excited to announce Apollo persisted queries as an example of that. And the idea here is rather than just issuing ad hoc queries at runtime, you register those queries at build time into a catalog. Now, that's not a new idea in GraphQL. If you have a monolith, you can do this with careful use of shared code and deployment. But it's much trickier to do this at scale and to do it incrementally. And so we've built the workflows that make that possible. For example, even in cases where you've got a mobile client in the field whose source code you don't have access to or that you can't update quickly. And for most orgs, we think the security benefits alone of persisted queries are a really sensible idea. It lets you lock your graph down to just the trusted queries written by your team. But it's also a big performance and ops win, too. Fundamentally, registered queries are a way to name and identify each query, and that lets other layers of your API stack, your gateways, your security tools, and so on, treat them as they treat your traditional endpoints today. And so it opens the door to a policy-based approach to security that integrates across that whole stack. Here's another example of that. We've added support for JOT tokens and claims and key rotation into the router, and we now support policy directives in subgraphs that let you write declarative access control rules right into your schema. You can enforce those rules internally in the router, or you can add a coprocessor to build a more complex integration with your identity system and add more complex predicates to meet your use cases. Security is an area that we are super excited about and committed to. Please let us know what more you want to be able to do with Graph on security. It's something that we're going to be putting a lot of energy into, and we're eager to get your perspective and your input here at Summit. Another vital ops area is observability. We have made a big investment here as well. Apollo Router now has over 20 metrics available covering everything from the individual requests over HTTP to the query planner performance to caching, subscriptions, uplink, all available to push into your OTel environment. We've built 3 patterns now for customizing your router and integrating into the stack, not just bare metal plugins that give you access to all of the router internals, but 2 patterns, scripting and coprocessors, that allow you to extend the functionality of the router and integrate into your environment while still running a stock build and not having to take responsibility for a delivery pipeline in your infrastructure. But the biggest thing we're doing here is cloud, because not everybody wants to spend the time operating the router. Not everybody has the ops capacity that meets the business requirements as you grow your graph. Last year, we announced GraphOS serverless. Serverless is a no-knobs way to get all the developer velocity benefits of the graph without the ops burden. It's great for prototyping. It's great for small projects. But we hinted at something bigger, and I'm very excited today to announce a new option, GraphOS Dedicated, for mission-critical workloads that have to be at internet scale and have all of the ops sophistication necessary that goes with them. And to tell us more about GraphOS serverless, let me invite Jack Selwood up on stage to share what we've built.
Thanks, Matt. I'm here to tell you more about Dedicated, not serverless. But GraphOS Cloud Dedicated is here. I'm so excited to share what the team's been up to. Dedicated is built for your most mission-critical production workloads. We've actually already onboarded our first few preview customers. Dedicated is built for platform teams. As Matt said earlier, the supergraph is great for bringing together application developers and API owners. And we want to design Dedicated to bring those two together with the platform teams they work with for a platform that scales. They told us they wanted Dedicated to integrate with their existing cloud environments very tightly with their stack. They wanted scalable, predictable performance they could control, and they wanted to customize and extend a router how they see fit. If you take a look at serverless, we had customers come to us and say, hey, my subgraphs are running in, for example, AWS US East 1. Serverless runs out of US Central. And they would say, this really doesn't work for me. I'm thrilled to share that Dedicated runs on AWS in the region of your choice. You get the benefits of AWS's world-class infrastructure, improved subgraph latency, and most excitingly, support for AWS native features. Here's an example. Dedicated supports all AWS compute resources, for example, running in US East 1. This is particularly important in a federation context where you're building a query plan. A query plan will resolve multiple requests across multiple subgraphs, so minimizing subgraph to router latency is important. This means Dedicated can execute even the most complex queries in a fast manner. Let's talk about security. Other than speed, running on AWS lets us add private networking. This means all cloud router and subgraph communication travels privately over AWS's network, not over the public internet. We selected AWS VPC Lattice because it's a fantastic way to do VPC peering. It's zero trust and declarative, so there's no staging, getting access to production, or mingling of environments. This, again, supports all AWS resources, but it doesn't stop there. We're bringing the JOC claim validation and authentication features that Matt talked about earlier into Dedicated as well, so you have a complete security story. There's nothing more important to platform teams other than security. It's observability. And so all the fantastic observability features available in Apollo Router are also coming to Dedicated. This includes sending traces and metrics to an open telemetry collector of your choice or to a third-party APM like Datadog. Support for logs coming soon. My favorite part about Dedicated, though, is that it gives you all of the enterprise capabilities built into Apollo Router in a completely ops-free environment. This means you can build real-time experiences with federated subscriptions, implement persistent queries to lock down your graph, using your own language, build custom API middleware with coprocessor, implement schema authentication or schema authorization. All of those enterprise capabilities included in Dedicated. It's perfect for proof of concept or scaling to the moon. Speaking of scaling, Dedicated is our first scale-on-demand plan. We'll have 2 flavors of this, pay-as-you-go consumption pricing and volume discounts for those customers really going into production. This is great. You can start small and scale up and upgrade as you go. Tomorrow, Brian, George, and I will have a talk more in depth on Dedicated. We'd love to give you a demo. And if you're very eager, we'd love to get you set up with a trial today. So feel free to scan the QR code, and the team will reach out. Thank you all so much.
You're all here, so you get first crack at it. We're excited. Come find us. So these are the big pillars for us. We are first and foremost focused on the open foundation of federation. It's the backbone of the supergraph. It's why we're here, and it's what's making possible all of these amazing innovations and also all of the amazing customer experiences that you're all building. We're focused on bringing more to the graph, and there's more to come here. And we're focused on building a world-class story operationally, whether you want to run that infrastructure in your environment or want to be in the cloud. We're there for you, and we think that's going to be super valuable as these spread and scale. Every investment you make in the graph at your company helps teams ship features earlier and more often. And I just want to recognize and commend you all for that. But the work that you put into the graph doesn't just help your team's plan for the roadmap items that you have today. You're building a platform of reusable building blocks that can better support not only initiatives like personalization or async, but AI and the movements and experiences that are going to fuel technology tomorrow. And at the end of the day, I think that's what we're all here to do and what has us so excited about doing it together. So on to the rest of the conference. Enjoy.